My mother-in-law occupied our house, and with her upbringing brought our son to tears. We threw her out of the house, but I always thought our life was solid. Nothing extraordinary, but steady. My husband, Alex, and I had built something we were proud of. Our home, our routine, and above all, our family with our son Luke. At 6, Luke was a lively, curious kid, always coming up with stories about dinosaurs or astronauts. We had a rhythm to our days. I'm Amanda, 36, and I work in a small local bakery I've loved since I was a teenager. Alex, 33, works in marketing. We're not rolling in money, but we're comfortable, or at least, we were. It all started with a phone call from Judith, Alex's mother. The moment I heard his tone shift into that blend of exasperation and resignation, I knew it was her. Judith's voice was loud enough that I could catch pieces of her rant through the speaker. Something about her boss being a tyrant and her landlord being a greedy snake. When Alex hung up, he rubbed his temples and muttered, "She lost her job and her apartment." I was sympathetic at first. Judith had always been dramatic, but losing both in quick succession was tough. Alex avoided eye contact as he added, "She, needs a place to stay. Just until she gets back on her feet." I felt my stomach tighten. Judith wasn't the easiest person to be around. She had a habit of taking over everything, conversations, rooms, plans, but I couldn't bring myself to say no outright. "How long do you think she'll need?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Couple of months, max," Alex replied, though his tone lacked conviction. 2 days later, Judith arrived, suitcase in one hand, a cat carrier in the other. I didn't even know she had a cat. "This is Cinnamon," she announced, as though we discussed adding a pet to the family. The cat yowled like it hated its name as much as I already did. Judith wasted no time making herself at home. She criticized the layout of our living room, saying the couch should face the window for better feng shui. She complained about the cheap toaster that didn't brown her bread evenly. And she absolutely refused to sleep on the pull-out couch in the den, claiming her back couldn't handle it. "I'll just take the guest room," she said as if it were a given. The guest room was Luke's playroom. Luke wasn't thrilled about the change, but Alex and I convinced him it was temporary. We packed up his toys and shoved them into bins that barely fit in his bedroom closet. Judith didn't thank us. Instead, she complained that the mattress in the guest room was too firm and demanded we buy a new one. Things escalated quickly. Judith had a way of turning minor inconveniences into major dramas. When I asked her to clean up after Cinnamon, she declared it animal cruelty to limit where the cat could roam. The cat's litter box ended up in the corner of our kitchen because, according to Judith, it was the most convenient spot. Then there was the food. I made lasagna one night, one of Alex's favorites. Judith picked at her plate, then asked if we had anything less carb-heavy. She started taking over dinner, insisting on making kale smoothies for all of us. Luke, bless him, tried to drink one, but he gagged halfway through and whispered to me later, "It tastes like grass, Mommy." I could handle the inconvenience, the unsolicited advice, and even the kale smoothies. But what pushed me over the edge was how Judith started undermining me with Luke. She let him stay up late to watch movies, telling him, "Don't worry, sweetie, your mom won't mind." When I found out, I confronted her, but she waved me off. "Kids need to have fun, Amanda. You're too strict." Strict? I felt like I was losing my grip on my own home. Alex tried to mediate, but he hated confrontation. "She's just adjusting," he'd say. Or, "Let's give her some time." But as weeks turned into months, it was clear Judith wasn't making any effort to find a job or a new place. She spent her days on our couch, watching daytime TV and scrolling through Facebook. Occasionally, she'd announce she was networking with old friends, but I never saw her send out a single resume. By the 3rd month, I was at my wit's end. One night, after Judith left dirty dishes in the sink for the 5th time that week, I exploded. "This isn't working, Alex. She's not trying to get back on her feet. She's taking over." Alex sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I know it's hard, but she's my mom. I can't just kick her out. And what about us?" I shot back. "What about Luke? This is his home, Alex, not hers." The argument went in circles, as it always did. But the worst part? Judith overheard us. I found out later because she confronted me the next morning. "I'm sorry you think I'm such a burden," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe I should just live on the streets, huh?" It was classic Judith, twist the narrative until she was the victim. And of course, Alex felt guilty. He spent the next week bending over backward to keep her happy, which only made things worse for me. The final straw came when Judith offered to help with Luke's school project. He had to make a diorama of a rainforest, and he was so excited about it. I came home from work one day to find Judith sitting at the table, gluing plastic animals into a shoebox while Luke watched from the sidelines, sulking. He was taking too long, she explained. I just finished it for him. Luke was heartbroken. He didn't even want to take the diorama to school. I pulled Alex aside that night and told him, this has to stop. She's not just ruining our space. She's ruining our family. I wish I could say Alex stood up to her. But instead, he suggested we all sit down and talk. Judith spent the entire family meeting playing the martyr, crying about how hard her life was and how ungrateful we were. By the end, Alex looked ready to give her the deed to the house just to get her to stop crying. I don't know how much more I can take. This was supposed to be temporary, but Judith has turned our lives upside down. I feel like a guest in my own home. And the worst part? I don't see a way out. When Judith first called about her situation, Alex and I sat down to talk things through. I wanted to be supportive. She's his mother, after all, but we both agreed there had to be boundaries. We made a list of rules to avoid chaos. She would contribute to household expenses, help with chores, and most importantly, respect our space and routines. 2 months. That's all we committed to. Do you think she'll actually stick to the rules? I asked Alex as we cleaned out the guest room. It wasn't much of a guest room. It doubled as storage for holiday decorations and old furniture. Alex shrugged, avoiding my gaze. We'll make it work, he said. I didn't believe him. Judith arrived 2 days later with her usual flair for drama. Her taxi pulled up to the curb, and she stepped out wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses like some retired movie star. Behind her, the driver struggled to unload an alarming number of suitcases. It's just the essentials, Judith chirped as she waved at us from the driveway. The first thing she said when she walked into the house was, "Oh, this is cozy." That's Judith speak for not good enough. She scanned the living room like a realtor assessing a fixer-upper, then frowned at the guest room. "I thought I'd have a little more space," she said, eyeing the boxes we hadn't had time to move to the attic. "And the walls, beige? Really?" I bit my tongue. Alex, ever the peacemaker, jumped in. "We can clear out the rest of the stuff this weekend, Mom. And maybe add some of your touches to make it feel more like home." By touches, Judith apparently thought he meant a full-blown makeover. The very next day, I came home from work to find Judith in the guest room, flipping through paint swatches with a man I'd never seen before. "Oh, Amanda, this is Carl. He's giving me a quote for repainting. Don't worry, I'll pay for it eventually." Carl turned out to be her old friend from church who dabbled in interior design. He spent an hour lecturing me about color psychology, while Judith pushed for a deep crimson wall that would energize the space. I firmly vetoed it, reminding her that this was still my house. She pouted but settled for a light blue that, in her words, was barely acceptable. Things only got worse from there. Judith didn't just ignore our rules. She bulldozed through them like they were suggestions. We'd agreed she'd contribute financially, but her idea of helping was buying cinnamon gourmet cat food while Alex and I paid for groceries, utilities, and her share of the rent. She also never once did a load of laundry or cleaned up after herself. When I asked her to pitch in, she'd sigh dramatically and say, "I'm just so overwhelmed right now, Amanda. Can't you see that?" Her attitude towards the house was infuriating. She criticized everything: the layout of the kitchen, the cheap fixtures in the bathroom, even the way I folded towels. One night, as I was loading the dishwasher, she stood over me and declared, "You're doing it wrong. Plates need to face the center, or they won't get clean." I snapped, "If you think you can do it better, be my guest." She didn't, of course. She just wandered off, muttering about how young people don't know anything. But the real nightmare started when Judith decided to fix our routine. She believed Luke's bedtime was too early and started letting him stay up to watch movies with her. She also convinced Alex to swap out our morning coffee for some awful herbal tea she claimed was better for digestion, and she had no concept of personal space. She'd barge into our bedroom unannounced, claiming she just needed to borrow something or wanted to chat. The tipping point came when Judith started inviting people over without asking. One afternoon, I came home to find a group of women sitting in my living room, sipping wine and laughing loudly. "Book club," Judith explained, as though it were the most normal thing in the world. I didn't even know she was in a book club. "Judith, you can't just invite people over without letting us know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, don't be so uptight, Amanda. It's just a little gathering," she said with a wave of her hand. "You should join us. We're discussing the art of aging gracefully. You might learn a thing or two." That night, I confronted Alex. This isn't working, I told him. She's taking over. She doesn't follow any of the rules, and now she's throwing parties in our house. She's not throwing parties, Alex said, though he sounded unsure. She's just adjusting. She's not adjusting, I snapped. She's steamrolling us. Alex promised to talk to her, but his idea of talking was more like pleading. Judith brushed him off, saying she'd try to do better. Of course, nothing changed. If anything, she became more brazen. One night, she announced she was hosting a dinner party for her friends to celebrate her fresh start. I flat out refused. Judith, this is our house, not a banquet hall. She gasped like I'd slapped her. I can't believe you're being so selfish, Amanda. After everything I've been through, you can't even let me have one evening of joy. Alex, predictably, sided with her. It's just one night, he said. What's the harm? The harm, as it turned out, was significant. The dinner party was a disaster. Judith invited more people than our dining table could handle, so half her guests ended up eating in the living room. Cinnamon managed to jump onto the counter and knock over a bowl of salad, which Judith blamed on me for not watching him, and one of her friends spilled red wine on our beige carpet. By the end of the night, I was so furious I could barely speak. Judith, of course, acted like everything had gone perfectly. What a lovely evening, she said as her guests left. We should do this more often. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, replaying the evening in my head and wondering how things had spiraled so far out of control. The 2-month agreement we'd made seemed like a distant memory. Judith wasn't just a guest in our home. She was the queen of it, and we were her subjects. The next morning, I told Alex, we need to set a firm deadline for her to leave. She's not looking for a job, she's not respecting our rules, and she's making our lives miserable. He hesitated. I know it's hard, but she's my mom. And I'm your wife, I interrupted. This isn't just about her anymore, Alex. It's about us. It's about Luke. He's starting to think this is normal. Alex promised again to talk to her, but I wasn't holding my breath. Judith had a way of turning every conversation into a guilt trip, and Alex was terrible at standing his ground. As far as I could see, we were trapped, and Judith was just getting started. I thought we'd reached the peak of Judith's audacity, but I was wrong. Living with her was like a never-ending test of my patience, and every time I thought we'd established some boundaries, she'd bulldoze through them without a second thought. The conflicts started small, almost annoyingly petty, but they quickly snowballed into full-blown disasters that left me questioning my sanity. It all started with dinner. I'd mentioned my shellfish allergy to Judith more than once since she'd moved in, but I guess she decided it wasn't her problem. One evening, I came home from work to the smell of something rich and buttery wafting through the house. At first, I thought maybe Alex had cooked, a rare but welcome surprise. Then I walked into the kitchen and saw Judith standing over a skillet, stirring a pile of shrimp in garlic sauce. I froze. Judith, I said carefully, you know I'm allergic to shellfish? She didn't even look up. Oh, Amanda, don't be so dramatic. You're not allergic. You're just picky. I stared at her, dumbfounded. I'm not picky. I have a severe allergy. I can't even touch shrimp without breaking out in hives. Well, don't touch it then, she said with a shrug, as if that was the end of the discussion. She plated the shrimp and set it on the table, calling Alex and Luke to dinner. I spent the rest of the evening eating a peanut butter sandwich in the living room, fuming. When I brought it up to Alex later, he just sighed and said, she probably didn't mean anything by it. I'll talk to her. The next week, she did it again. This time, it was shrimp scampi. When I reminded her of my allergy, she rolled her eyes. Amanda, you're a grown woman. You can cook something else if you don't like what I make. It's not about liking it, Judith. It's about my health, I snapped, but she just waved me off like I was being unreasonable. That night, I ended up at urgent care after accidentally touching the serving spoon she'd used. My hands broke out in a rash so bad that I couldn't bend my fingers. Judith's response? Maybe you should be more careful. No apology, no remorse. Just another excuse to make me feel like I was overreacting. Then came the criticism of Luke. She'd always had opinions about how we parented, but she'd usually kept them to herself, or at least muttered them under her breath. But now, she was outright vocal about it. She told Alex that we were too soft on him and that he needed more discipline. One afternoon, I caught her telling Luke that he couldn't play with his favorite toy dinosaur because dinosaurs are for babies. Luke's face crumpled, and he ran to his room. When I confronted her, she looked at me like I was the crazy one. I'm just trying to help toughen him up. He's going to need a thicker skin in this world. He's 6, Judith. He doesn't need a thicker skin. He needs to feel safe and loved. Oh, please, she scoffed. You coddle him too much. That's why he's so sensitive. The worst part was how she'd undermine me at every turn. If I told Luke no, she'd turn around and tell him yes. If I asked him to clean up his toys, she'd do it for him and then say, "See? Grandma's not mean like Mommy." I tried to keep my cool, but it was exhausting. And it wasn't just Luke she interfered with. It was me too. I work part-time from home, so I have a desk in the corner of the living room where I keep my laptop and papers organized. Or at least, I used to. Judith had a habit of tidying up my workspace, which meant moving everything around so I couldn't find anything. One morning, I woke up to find my laptop gone. Panicked, I tore through the house looking for it, only to find it on the kitchen counter with a sticky note on it. Thought this looked better here. Judith, I said through gritted teeth, please don't move my work things. I need them to stay organized. Oh, Amanda, relax. I was just trying to help. Your desk was such a mess. It's not a mess. It's organized in a way that makes sense to me. Please don't touch it again. She gave me a patronizing smile. Fine, whatever you say. Of course, she didn't listen. The next day, I found my papers shoved into a drawer and my laptop covered in Cinnamon's fur. Apparently, she decided to use my desk to brush the cat. I nearly lost it. But the final straw came when she took my car without asking. It was a Saturday morning, and I was planning to take Luke to a friend's birthday party. I went to grab my keys, but they weren't on the hook. Confused, I checked my purse, the kitchen counter, and even my coat pockets. Nothing. Judith, have you seen my car keys? I asked, already dreading the answer. Oh, I borrowed your car to run some errands, she said casually, as if this was a perfectly normal thing to do. You what? I said, my voice rising. Well, my car's low on gas, and I didn't feel like stopping to fill it up. I figured you wouldn't mind. Judith, you didn't even ask. I shouted. And I need my car. I'm supposed to take Luke to a birthday party. Oh, he can miss one party. It's not the end of the world. I couldn't believe her. I paced the house for an hour, waiting for her to come back. When she finally did, she handed me the keys with a breezy, "Thanks, Amanda," and walked off to her room. I got in the car to find the gas tank completely empty and a receipt for a $12 car wash in the cup holder. She'd used my car to get it detailed, but she couldn't bother to fill the tank. That night, I confronted Alex. I'm done, I told him. She has to go. Amanda, you know it's not that simple, he said, rubbing his temples. Yes, it is, I snapped. She doesn't respect me, she doesn't respect our rules, and now she's costing us money. This was supposed to be temporary, Alex. It's been 3 months. Enough is enough. He promised again, to talk to her, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. Judith wasn't the kind of person who listened to reason. She was the kind of person who did whatever she wanted, consequences be damned. And we were the ones left picking up the pieces. By the time Judith's antics reached their crescendo, I was operating on pure frustration and caffeine. My days were spent diffusing one disaster after another, and my nights were restless, filled with anxiety about what she'd do next. But even in my wildest nightmares, I couldn't have predicted how far she'd go. It started with the dinner party. I had no idea Judith was planning anything until I came home from work one Friday evening and found the house in chaos. There were floral centerpieces on the dining table, stacks of mismatched chairs hauled in from God knows where, and the unmistakable smell of roasted meat filling the air. Judith stood in the kitchen, wearing a floral apron that definitely wasn't hers, barking orders at a catering team like she was Martha Stewart. What's going on here? I asked, my voice barely masking my irritation. Oh, Amanda. Perfect timing, she chirped. I'm hosting a little dinner party for some old friends. You don't mind, do you? I stared at her, dumbfounded. A little dinner party? Judith, there are at least 20 chairs in the dining room. It's just a casual gathering, she said, waving me off like I was overreacting. I thought it would be nice to catch up with some people. And don't worry, I hired caterers. You don't have to lift a finger. That's not the point. I snapped. This is our house, Judith. You can't just throw a party without asking. She sighed dramatically, as if I were being unreasonable. You're always so uptight, Amanda. It's just one evening. Don't be such a killjoy. Alex walked in then, holding Luke's hand. The poor kid looked as confused as I felt. What's going on? Alex asked, glancing between us. Your mother decided to host a dinner party without telling us, I said, crossing my arms. It's not a big deal, Judith interjected before Alex could respond. And besides, You've been so busy, Alex. I thought you could use some time to relax and socialize. I expected Alex to back me up, but instead, he rubbed the back of his neck and said, "Maybe it's fine, Amanda. It's just one night." I wanted to scream. "Alex, this isn't fine." She didn't even ask. Judith took that as her cue to swoop in. "See? This is what I mean, Alex. She's always trying to isolate me from the family. I can't even have one evening of fun without her getting upset." "Isolate you?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've taken over our house, Judith. You do whatever you want without any consideration for us." Judith gasped, clutching her chest like I just insulted her to her core. "I can't believe you'd say that. After everything I've been through? I'm just trying to rebuild my life, Amanda. Why are you so intent on making me feel unwelcome?" Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, and Judith's friends started pouring in. I didn't recognize most of them, but they greeted her with hugs and laughter, as if they were arriving at her personal mansion and not my home. One woman even complimented the decor, and Judith had the audacity to say, "Thank you. I've been working on making it feel more like me." I spent the evening holed up in our bedroom with Luke, who was equally upset. "Why are all these people here, Mommy?" he asked, tugging at my sleeve. "Grandma invited them," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "But don't worry, they'll be gone soon." Luke nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. And honestly, neither did I. The next morning, I expected Judith to at least acknowledge how inappropriate her actions had been. Instead, she doubled down. While Alex and I were cleaning up the mess she'd left behind, she waltzed into the kitchen, carrying a tray of leftover hors d'oeuvres. "Wasn't last night lovely?" she said, smiling like she'd just hosted a royal gala. "Everyone had such a wonderful time. I really think we should do it more often." "Do what more often?" I snapped. "Throw parties in someone else's house without asking?" Judith rolled her eyes. "Oh, Amanda, you're always so negative." It's no wonder Alex looks so stressed all the time. That was her new favorite angle, trying to drive a wedge between Alex and me. Over the next few days, she started making little comments, planting seeds of doubt wherever she could. "You know, Alex, I think Amanda's a bit too controlling," she'd say when I asked her to clean up after herself. Or, "Don't you miss the way things used to be, before everything got so rigid?" At first, Alex brushed it off, but then she took things to a whole new level. It was a Tuesday evening when Judith casually mentioned that she'd reconnected with someone from Alex's past. We were sitting in the living room, and she was flipping through a photo album she'd unearthed from her boxes. "Do you remember Sarah, Alex? Your high school sweetheart?" Alex blinked, clearly caught off guard. Yeah. I haven't talked to her in years." "Well, I ran into her at the grocery store last week," Judith said, smiling slyly. "She looks amazing, by the way, and so accomplished. She said she'd love to catch up sometime." I stiffened. "Why are you bringing this up, Judith?" She ignored me, turning her attention back to Alex. "You should reach out to her. It's always nice to reconnect with old friends." "Mom, I'm married," Alex said, his voice uneasy. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," Judith said with a laugh. "I'm not saying anything inappropriate. It's just coffee. You could use more social connections, Alex. You're always so busy with work and family. A little time for yourself wouldn't hurt." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Judith, that's completely inappropriate. Alex doesn't need to reconnect with an ex." "Why are you so threatened, Amanda?" she shot back, narrowing her eyes. "It's not like he's going to run off with her. Honestly, you're so insecure sometimes." I turned to Alex, hoping he'd shut her down, but he looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to take sides. "I'm not meeting Sarah, Mom," he said finally. "It's not appropriate." Judith huffed. "Fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize you've let all your friendships fall by the wayside." That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told Alex exactly how I felt. "She's trying to ruin our marriage, Alex. She's undermining me at every turn, and now she's suggesting you meet up with your ex? How much more are you going to let her get away with?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know she's been difficult, Amanda, but she's my mom. What am I supposed to do? Kick her out?" "Yes," I said firmly. "This has gone on long enough. She's not just a guest anymore. She's a problem." Alex promised to talk to her, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. Judith wasn't the kind of person who listened to reason. She was the kind of person who thrived on chaos, and as long as she was in our house, that chaos was here to stay. By the time we decided on an eviction deadline for Judith, the atmosphere in our house was unbearable. Every day felt like a battle, and every interaction with her was a test of endurance. Alex and I had reached our breaking point, But the silver lining was that we finally started to act as a team. It was the only way to survive the madness. Judith's behavior didn't just remain unbearable, it became downright petty. One morning, I woke up to find my phone missing. After a frantic search, I discovered it in the freezer, next to a half-empty tub of ice cream. "Oh, Amanda," Judith said innocently when I confronted her. "I must have put it there by accident when I was cleaning up." Cleaning up? The woman hadn't cleaned a single thing since she moved in. Another time, she switched the sugar in the sugar bowl with salt, which turned my morning coffee into an undrinkable mess. "It was just a little joke," she said with a smirk when I pointed it out. Luke wasn't spared, either. Judith hid his favorite toy, a stuffed dinosaur named Rex, and then claimed she had no idea where it went. Poor Luke was devastated, searching high and low for it until I finally found it stuffed behind the couch cushions. "Kids need to learn resilience," Judith said when I confronted her. "You're raising him to be too soft." Her antics didn't just stay inside the house. One Saturday, Alex discovered that his car's tires had been deflated. "Must be those neighborhood kids," Judith said, shaking her head as if she were concerned. But the next day, she let it slip that she'd seen Alex's car parked too close to the curb and thought he should learn to be more mindful. "Are you saying you deflated my tires, Mom?" Alex asked, his voice rising in disbelief. "It was just a harmless lesson," she replied. "You always were so careless with your things." Alex's jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything. Later, he admitted to me, "I don't even know who she is anymore." The tipping point came after one final stunt. Judith had been using the laundry room as her personal storage space, piling up boxes of old clothes and trinkets she brought with her. One day, I walked in to find my clothes, freshly washed and neatly folded, dumped unceremoniously on the floor to make room for her things. "Judith," I called out, furious. She appeared in the doorway, feigning innocence. "What's wrong, Amanda?" "You dumped my clothes on the floor," I said, holding up a shirt now covered in lint and cat hair. "Why would you do that?" "I needed the space," she said matter-of-factly. "You should really invest in a bigger house if you're going to have so much stuff." That was it. I marched into the living room, where Alex was sitting, and said, "We're setting a deadline. She has to be out by the end of the month." Alex didn't argue. "I'll talk to her tonight," he said, his tone resigned. When he broke the news to Judith, she didn't take it well. "You're kicking me out?" she screeched, clutching her chest like she was about to have a heart attack. "After everything I've done for this family?" "Mom, this was always supposed to be temporary," Alex said firmly. "It's been months. You need to start rebuilding your own life." She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "This is your doing, isn't it? You've wanted me gone from the start." I didn't take the bait. "Judith, this is about what's best for everyone, including you. We've given you time, but now it's time for you to move on." Judith spent the next week alternating between guilt trips and outright sabotage. She'd accidentally delete Alex's work emails, leave the fridge door open so our food spoiled, and blast the TV at full volume late at night, knowing it would wake Luke. But Alex and I stood firm. As the end of the month approached, Judith's desperation reached new heights. One evening, she cornered Alex in the kitchen and tried a new tactic. "You know, Alex," she began, her tone dripping with faux concern, "Amanda is trying to isolate you from your family. She doesn't respect me, and she doesn't respect you. Is this really the kind of marriage you want?" Alex sighed, leaning against the counter. "Mom, stop. This isn't about Amanda. This is about you not respecting our boundaries." Judith wasn't ready to give up. "What boundaries? All I've done is try to help, and this is how I'm repaid? You're letting her tear us apart." "I'm not letting anyone tear us apart," Alex said, his voice steady. "But this isn't your house. You've overstayed your welcome, and it's time for you to go." Her face twisted with anger, but Alex didn't back down. For once, he didn't let her guilt him into submission. That night, she tried a different approach. She came to me, teary-eyed, holding a photo album. "Look at these pictures," she said, flipping through pages of old family photos. "This is who we are, Amanda. A family. I don't understand why you hate me so much." I stared at her, exhausted. "Judith, I don't hate you, but your behavior has made it impossible to live together. This isn't working for anyone." She sniffled dramatically. "I just wanted to feel like I belonged. I didn't have the energy to argue." "You'll always belong in Alex's life, Judith. But this house? It's ours, and we need it back." On the last day of the month, a moving truck arrived. Alex and I had helped pack up Judith's things over the past week, partly to speed up the process and partly to make sure she didn't accidentally leave anything behind. She spent the morning sulking in the guest room, refusing to lift a finger. When the movers started loading her boxes, Judith put on one final show. She hugged Luke dramatically, saying, "Grandma's going to miss you so much, sweetheart. I hope your mommy doesn't keep us apart." Luke, bless him, just looked confused. "Are you coming back soon?" he asked. "No, Luke," I said gently. "Grandma's going to her new home." Judith shot me a glare but didn't say anything. The movers finally finished, and Judith climbed into her car, which she'd conveniently had repaired at our expense after one of her lessons. As she drove away, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in months, the house was quiet, peaceful. That night, Alex and I sat on the couch, exhausted but united. "We did it," he said, taking my hand. "She's gone." "Yeah," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. "She's gone." It wasn't the perfect ending. I knew Judith would always find ways to insert herself into our lives. But for now, we had our home back. And for the first time in months, it felt like ours again. When Judith finally moved out, I thought we were free. The house felt lighter without her constant presence, and Alex and I finally started to rebuild the peace that had been missing for months. But Judith wasn't done. Even without living under our roof, she found new ways to stir up trouble. And this time, she went public. It started with a Facebook post. I only found out about it because one of my coworkers, Rachel, pulled me aside at work. "Hey, Amanda, have you seen what your mother-in-law posted?" she asked, lowering her voice. "What?" I frowned, already feeling the anxiety creep in. Rachel pulled up her phone and showed me the post. Judith had written a long, dramatic account of her terrible experience living with us, painting herself as a victim of cruel and heartless treatment. She claimed we'd forced her out onto the streets and implied that I was the mastermind behind it all. The post was accompanied by a photo of her looking pitifully sad, sitting next to one of her boxes. "She's calling you out by name," Rachel added, scrolling to the comments, which were full of sympathy and outrage. People are eating it up. Sure enough, Judith's post had gone semi-viral in our small community. Comments like, "How could they treat you like that?" and "What kind of daughter-in-law would do this to her family?" filled the page. Some of the names were familiar, parents from Luke's school, neighbors, even acquaintances from church. I felt my stomach twist. "Unbelievable," I muttered. "She left on her own after we gave her months to get her act together." Rachel hesitated. "You might want to say something. People are starting to talk." When I got home, I showed Alex the post. He looked furious, but also helpless. "What do we do?" he asked. "We fight back," I said firmly. "She wants to drag this into the public eye? Fine. Let's give them the truth." The next day, I dug out every financial record from the months Judith had lived with us. Bank statements, grocery receipts, utility bills, all of it. I created a detailed breakdown of how much her stay had cost us, highlighting the fact that she hadn't contributed a single dollar, despite agreeing to do so when she moved in. Then, I drafted my own Facebook post. It wasn't dramatic or emotional like Judith's. It was cold, factual, and to the point. I included screenshots of the financial documents, with sensitive information redacted, and wrote, "Judith's claims are false. Here's the proof of what actually happened while she stayed with us." We supported her financially for months without any help, and when it became clear she wasn't willing to respect our boundaries, we asked her to leave. She was given ample time to prepare, and she left voluntarily. Within hours, my post started gaining traction. Friends and acquaintances began commenting in support, and even some of the people who had sided with Judith started backtracking. One comment stuck out to me. "It's clear who the real problem is here. Amanda, you're a saint for putting up with her for so long." Judith didn't take the public rebuttal well. She posted a rambling, defensive response, accusing me of twisting the truth and claiming that the financial documents were fake. But by then, most people weren't buying her story anymore. What I didn't expect was how far Judith would go next. 2 weeks later, I was at home when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a woman and a man in business attire, holding clipboards. The woman introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Karen, and this is my colleague Tom. We're with Child Protective Services. We received a report about potential neglect in your household." For a moment, I couldn't even process what she was saying. "Neglect?" I repeated, dumbfounded. Karen nodded, her expression neutral but firm. "We're required to follow up on all reports. Would you mind if we came in and had a look around?" It hit me like a ton of bricks. This was Judith's doing. She must have called CPS to retaliate against me. My hands shook with anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Of course," I said, stepping aside to let them in. Karen and Tom walked through the house, taking notes and asking questions. They inspected Luke's room, checked the fridge to ensure we had food, and even asked Luke a few questions about his daily routine. Luke, bless him, was completely unfazed. He proudly showed them his dinosaur collection and told them how much he loved his school. After about an hour, Karen closed her clipboard and gave me a reassuring smile. "There are no signs of neglect here," she said. "Everything looks perfectly fine." "Of course it does," I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "Can I ask who made the report?" "I'm afraid we can't disclose that," Karen said, but her sympathetic expression told me everything I needed to know. After they left, I called Alex and told him what had happened. He was livid. "She's gone too far this time," he said. "We need to confront her." "No," I said. "That's what she wants, for us to react, to give her more ammunition. We're not stooping to her level." Instead, I contacted a lawyer. He advised me to document everything: Judith's social media posts, the CPS visit, and any further attempts she made to interfere in our lives. "If it escalates, you'll want a paper trail," he said. For the next few weeks, Judith tried to keep the drama going. She posted cryptic messages on Facebook about toxic family members and even hinted that she was considering legal action against us. But her audience had shrunk considerably. Most people had moved on, and the few who still supported her were the same enablers who'd been feeding her behavior for years. Meanwhile, Alex and I focused on rebuilding our lives. We enrolled Luke in a new after-school program, started planning a family vacation, and even hosted a small dinner party, our first one since Judith had left. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments when the stress of the past few months weighed on us, but we were finally starting to feel like a family again. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Alex turned to me and said, "You know, I think this whole ordeal has made us stronger." I nodded, leaning against the counter. "Yeah, it's been hell, but we got through it." "And Judith?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "She's someone else's problem now." And with that, we closed the chapter on Judith and all the chaos she brought into our lives. For the first time in a long time, the future felt bright.